to Fantastic History. I'm Clay.
I'm Sarah.
We're a husband and wife duo who enjoy telling each other about amazing events, people, and mysteries throughout history. And we are still back.
Yay!
It's my first episode back since our big break. If you're listening to this in the distant future, you have no idea that such a break occurred. But yeah, we took about almost a year off. But we're back now.
Welcome back, honey.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah.
It's good to be back in the saddle. And I really wanted to start this new season off with a bang. And today I wanted to share a story that is a fantastical story, so bizarre that it seems barely logical for a Farley Brothers or a Pauly Shore movie.
Oh, God. Not Pauly Shore.
But it's real. But I think we need to set a foundation that the main topic of this episode, so it's framed properly.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to do that. You got to start from the foundation, man.
Sure.
So we need to talk about psychics.
Oh, I'm always ready to talk about psychics.
Now,
I
of
have
course,
so many personal stories.
we've talked a lot about psychics, actually, quite a few times
Okay.
on this show. But of course, prophets, fortune tellers, and oracles, they've existed for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
But we really wanted to deal with modern spiritualism that rose to prominence in the U.S. and the U.K. in the 19th century.
Oh, yeah. We've definitely talked about that. Our Arthur Conan Doyle episode.
Yeah. The rise of spiritualism post-World War I, with the seances and the mediums communicating with the dead.
Mm-hmm.
This led to the rise of the New Age movement, which heavily influenced the countercultural Eastern spiritualism enjoyed by hippies
Sure.
of the 60s and the human potential movement, which pushed the belief that humans could expand their hidden potential by unlocking their brains.
Oh, no.
This is also where we got the misconception that humans only use 10% of their brains.
Right.
So what would happen if you used 11% or more? We know that's bunk now, but... And this brings us to the heart of today's episode. You see, in the 1970s, the United States became aware that the Soviet Union was researching psychic phenomena.
Oh, boy.
And this wasn't a small research study either. The Russian government was putting serious money into this research and claims that they were producing real results. So, of course, the U.S. had to get on this too. Because if the Russians were doing it, the U.S. had to do it, and vice versa.
It was the Cold War, baby.
Almost no matter what it was.
No holds barred.
As is evident. The following decades of research would go under many code names, but the one that's most known by is the Stargate project. The first U.S. program began in 1970 called Scanate and was funded by the CIA. In 1972, Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ were hired by the Stanford Research Institute and funded by a grant from the U.S. government to research human abilities in remote viewing.
Okay.
There's probably going to be a lot of Sarah's classic sighs in response to things I say in this episode.
Classic size. You know what? That's nice to know about myself.
Yeah, it's almost like a catchphrase.
Oh.
I say something completely wacky. Sarah has no response other than just befuddlement. So remote viewing. This refers to the ability of someone to see or sense an object, person, or location with only their mind. They brought in gifted individuals to conduct psychic experiments, which included a young and largely unknown Uri Geller.
That's still unknown to me. I don't know who that is.
Oh, he's the spoon-bending magician from the 70s.
Oh, great. Yeah. I really thought you were going to say a young Miss Cleo, and I was going to jump up out of this chair screaming.
Yeah, we're not talking about Miss Cleo.
Ugh.
Yeah, Uri Geller, he was a big magician and a big fraud. Allegedly. I have to say allegedly.
Sorry.
That's okay. It also included Ingo Swann, who, like Puthoff, was a high-level Scientologist.
Oh, God.
But the research into remote viewing and other psychic abilities was only one part of their grand plan. In 1977, another program named Gondola Wish sought to determine what the applications of the Soviet psychic research what they're deploying, what type of threat they may pose with the Soviets' Jedi warriors.
So I have a quick question, and I apologize if you don't have an answer for this.
Sure.
What is the difference between remote viewing and like clairvoyance?
Well, I think clairvoyance is more like a general psychic ability, whereas remote viewing is a little bit more specific, but I could be wrong about that. Remote viewing is like, I'm sitting here, I close my eyes, and via some means or method, I can either sense or see like an image of a specific place.
Okay.
And then I can write down notes or information about that place.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I could be wrong, and if I am wrong, anyone out there listening, please feel free to let us know. So the Soviets were supposedly using their psychic soldiers in some way, and the U.S. wanted to know how. And then in 1978, Project Grill Flame put these years of research into use by implementing psychic soldiers into use within the U.S. military.
Oh, boy. Okay, great.
Now, this all sounds crazy, but you have to remember, as you're listening to all this, Sarah, this is real.
I mean, I was along for the ride when you were telling me about a scientist who really thought some college girl fucking a dolphin was going to advance science and get dolphins into Congress.
Yeah.
I feel like I've stuck with you through a lot worse than this. I am on board.
Okay. Just a reminder.
Yeah.
Now, according to declassified documents, between 1979 and 1984, these psychics conducted over 750 operational intelligence collection missions. These missions focused on gathering information on foreign enemies such as Iran and the Soviet Union, and many of these missions were specifically requested by different government agencies in order to gather specific data that they needed or wanted. I found a declassified briefing prepared by Lieutenant Colonel Brian Busby, who was a project manager for INSCOM, Project Center Lane. Because these projects, this Stargate project, as it's kind of known now, went under so many different names.
Great.
So there's so many names for that reason. In this briefing, he states over 85% of our operational missions have produced accurate target information.
Sorry, a what percentage?
85.
Huh.
Even more significant, approximately 50% of the 700 missions produced usable intelligence.
I have a question and an observation, but I feel like I'm just going to hold on to them.
Okay. Well, if you want to hold on to them, don't forget them. But if you want to go ahead and throw it out here now, then by all means.
I feel like certainly there must be a debunking on the horizon, because from what you've just said, they only used this method for 5 years. Over 40 years ago. So
It was longer than 5 years.
I thought you said 79 to 84.
Well,
Maybe not.
I mean, the project went on for longer.
Okay.
But you're right.
Okay.
This time frame we're talking about. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And a potential, what did you say? A potential
Debunking
is possible.
Okay.
But there's complications. It's a tightly woven web
Okay.
that we'll have to weasel our way through.
I can't wait.
Now, in the 1980s, Major General Albert Subtlebine became a sponsor of the research at Fort Meade and was convinced that psychics... So this guy was a true believer. He was convinced that psychics were real, along with other phenomena. He even thought that he could walk through walls.
Brother, those are called curtains.
This man was like, I am so on board with you guys.
He had me right up until then. I was like, yeah, no, I get it. I'm with you. You can't walk through walls, son.
Well, in 1983, the project had been changed to, I think we already discussed this, but INSCOM Center Lane, where Putoff was to develop a strategy to identify people with some psycho-energetic talent and train them to use remote viewing.
Okay.
So their idea was, instead of having a small task force of these gifted people, that you could recruit and train a whole battalion of psychic warriors.
Interesting.
It seemed like things were going just swimmingly until the 1984 National Academy of Sciences National Research Council evaluated the project.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Yep.
And you know what? They were not as impressed with the results.
Were they not?
It seems that either the NAS was not convinced of psychoenergetics, or the results the Army had been boasting were perhaps over-exaggerated.
Hard to believe.
Funding was officially pulled in 1985, but hope was not lost. Under Project Dragoon Absorb, I want the job of naming these projects.
It can't be that different from what you've said so far than being like the person who comes up with the names of nail polishes and like fun hair dye.
Yeah, but even like anything, Center Lane, Scannate, Grill Flame,
Stargate.
Stargate's a great one.
Stargate is a great one. Also a TV show,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say. Yeah.
Well, Dragoon Absorb, under this program, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, took over the activities and personnel of Center Lane, and then the unit was redesignated under a new project name, Sunstreak.
So this was really what they were doing with all their time.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Great.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They seemed to love it, man. In 1991, the project again transitioned to the Science Applications International Corporation and was renamed one last time.
Oh.
And that name was Stargate.
Okay, great. We finally got there.
But the project would be plagued with poor management, poor morale, and poor results.
Hard to believe, honestly.
Yeah. Sad, too. In 1995, the project was again to be transferred back to the CIA, but the CIA chose to terminate the project instead. Yeah, they determined that over the last 20 years, remote viewing had not produced enough data to be useful in intelligence operations.
No kidding.
Now, check this out, Sarah. We have... We now have 12 million documents related to Project Stargate from the Freedom of Information Act.
So, guys, this is, we didn't want to tell you, this is the real reason we took 10 months off, was because Clay had to read through 12 million documents for a single episode. You're welcome.
It was a rough one.
Golly. This man hasn't slept in a year.
I didn't read all of them.
Oh, okay, never mind. But
it just goes to show that how real and wacky this was. These documents claiming that there were some successful and interesting results from the project.
Mm-hmm.
There were some.
Sure.
And this is where the fun part of the story begins.
I was already having a ball. That's crazy.
The history is great, but you know what's even more fun? The specifics.
Oh!
What were these missions all about? What were they doing?
Right.
And what came of it? Well, I know. The method that the team used for their remote viewing subjects was very specific. Okay. They would present the subject with a sealed envelope that would usually have a location and time printed on it. The subject would not open the envelope, but they would have to obtain the information in the envelope through their supernatural powers and then view the location that's printed on the piece of paper inside the envelope. So they have to read the message without being able to physically see it, and then remote view the location.
I see.
And then report back what they are seeing.
Interesting.
This technique supposedly was to ensure the subject approached the mission with a completely blank slate. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like a good idea to determine if they were the real deal or not. Is because it's a lot harder to bullshit your way when you have no idea what you're supposed to be seeing.
Right, yeah.
One of the more vocal about his experiences as a military psychic is Army veteran Joe McGonigal. He claims to
This man's got a Harry Potter name, and he's a military psychic. I'm just saying.
Hey.
I love this for him.
He claimed to have been involved in nearly 450 missions to help locate hostages in Iran and locate a secret KGB agent in South Africa. Another subject named Rosemary Smith was asked to locate a Soviet Tu-22 bomber that went down somewhere in Africa.
Uh-oh.
The incident was later confirmed by President Jimmy Carter. He said the woman went into a trance and gave some latitude and longitude figures. We focused our satellite cameras on that point, and the plane was there.
Now what? I believe Jimmy Carter. He's about the only one, like the only president that I'd be like, I will take what you say at face value. That is crazy.
Well, he would also say that he processed this claim with skepticism.
Sure, you would.
You would hope.
But if they found, like, is there an explanation? Like a non-metaphysical explanation for that?
Well,
oh boy.
As I understand it, it may have been close, but maybe not exact enough to be it may have been close enough to be surprising, but maybe not close enough to rule out chance.
I don't know, man. I give the old girl like 100 square miles, and that's a miracle if she gets it right. That's nuts.
It's pretty nuts, to be perfectly honest with you.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Africa is enormous.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. Another subject reported that during a session, he saw a new type of Soviet submarine with 18 to 20 missile launch tubes and a large flat area at the end shaft. About 4 months later, a Soviet sub with these features was sighted by the American military.
How?
I don't know.
Is this like how Michael Scott invented unicorns before he ever knew what a unicorn was? Like, I think he was like 5 years old and he drew a horse with the horn on his head, even though he'd never seen a unicorn.
I don't know. I don't know.
Like, what are the odds? That's ridiculous.
So here's some more. Viewers also claim to identify the location of high-profile targets like Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, but these did not result in their apprehension.
Yes, famously.
Viewers were also apparently able to correctly identify some characteristics of secret locations like a Soviet nuclear testing area and a chemical warfare underground facility. A file dated May 22nd, 1984 documents probably the most bizarre mission of the project's lifespan. The file doesn't state any names, but Joe McGonigal later claims that it was him. You know, he probably would because he was kind of the famous guy.
Yeah, McGonigal.
Like, I'll take credit for whatever you got.
Sure.
The subject was handed so this is also from the Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And anyone can go and read these, by the way. I did. It was really interesting.
I assume they'll be linked in the show notes.
They will, but there's so many that it's really hard to find. I don't know if I saved this exact one, but check this out. Okay. So they handed him an envelope and was asked to share what he saw. The subject had a really difficult time describing what they were seeing, describing massive pyramids and large shadow people wearing strange clothing who told them that they were dying. All this strange stuff, right?
Ugh.
The file shares what was inside the envelope. The planet Mars.
Oh.
Time of interest, approximately 1 million years BC.
Oh, I don't like it.
Weird, right?
I don't like that.
Weird.
Ew. Ew, dude.
So, why did the CIA end Stargate? Because this sounds really cool.
Well, I will say, out of like 12 million documents. You named like 5 things.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. I read through a lot of documents, and a lot of them are kind of difficult to read.
Sure.
A lot of them heavily redacted.
Right.
Or just scribblings, notes. Not like you open a document and here's a easy to understand explanation of things, you know. So there was a lot to go through. But apparently there were a few reasons that likely played into this decision. And for one, the CIA conducted a review of the program with the assistance of the American Institutes for Research. Mm-hmm. Their report was released in November 1995 to the public. So what we can read it ourselves. And the 183 report performed 2 primary evaluations. The first was the research evaluation, which was to test viewers and determine if their abilities worked better than chance. This was their conclusion of this evaluation. Quote, a statistically significant laboratory effect has been demonstrated in the sense that its hits occur more often than chance, but it is unclear whether the observed effects can unambiguously be attributed to the paranormal ability of remote viewers as opposed to characteristics of the judges or of the target or some other characteristic of the method used.
What does that mean?
Basically, they don't know if they can attribute the higher hits to the paranormal or something else.
Okay.
Because they don't have a way to necessarily test this paranormal ability. And if they can't really test it, there's no way they can confirm its existence.
Sure. Okay.
They could also say magic pixies were whispering these things into their ears.
Sure.
Evidence has not been provided that clearly demonstrates that the cause of the hits are due to the operation of paranormal phenomena. The laboratory experiments have not identified the origins or nature of the remote viewing phenomenon, if it exists at all. End quote.
Okay.
So that was interesting, but the report continues to the operational evaluation, which was to determine if remote viewing could be used to gather intelligence information.
Right.
Because that's kind of the whole point.
Right.
The military would be like, oh, interesting. What are we going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
If we can't do anything with it, then it's kind of useless to us. So they reached the following conclusions. Quote, the conditions under which remote viewing phenomena is observed in laboratory settings do not apply in intelligence gathering situations. The end users indicate that although some accuracy was observed with regard to broad background characteristics, the remote viewing reports failed to produce the concrete, specific information valued in intelligence gathering.
Gotcha.
The information provided was inconsistent, inaccurate with regards to specifics, and required substantial subjective interpretation. End quote. So their report concluded that the information gathered by remote viewing is too vague and too ambiguous, which is not the kind of data that's appropriate for actionable intelligence. Perhaps if remote viewing is real, which they could not determine from this evaluation alone, the applications are limited to some other use.
Okay.
But not military intelligence.
Right.
Therefore, they advised against continuing the program.
Fair enough.
So I found that ending to be so interesting because they clearly did not say this is all bunk, ridiculous. They said maybe, but it's not really appropriate for the CIA.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But just because Project Stargate was canceled does not mean that the U.S. government's interest in psychic phenomena was over. From what we currently know, in 2014, the Office of Naval Research launched a 4-year program to study premonition, believing that a sixth sense would be useful for soldiers.
See, now that's clairvoyance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's more appropriate to the term, yeah. And who knows what other classified programs are still active, or if there actually are psychic soldiers working for the military. Maybe there are.
Right.
I mean, we're not going to know about it.
I have a friend who works in military intelligence, and I have jokingly referred to him as a witch on many occasions. I'm just putting it out there. He doesn't deny it. He just laughs. So, Ducky, I am on to you, brother.
It's confirmed.
It is confirmed.
Maybe somebody will spill the beans if that's the case, but I don't know. We're still waiting on that UFO stuff to be dropped.
Dude, Opal Grinder would not lie to us.
No.
Now that's a callback. If you got that joke, you are a real fan.
That's a callback to episode, what, 6?
3?
3?
I mean, it's an old one.
Episode 5.
5, Lonnie Zamora.
Feel free to check that one out. But, you know what? This is the end of the episode. So maybe go check out episode 5 after this. But hey, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with another fantastic yarn. In the meantime, please leave us a review and follow us on Instagram and Threads at Fantastic HPod. We're also on YouTube and TikTok at Fantastic History Podcast. And until next week, bye.
Bye.